means, drop to your knees, say that prayer, that kind of stuff.
And just not to interrupt, I should say, jump onto this, that the language of the Jesus prayer that says, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy upon, Son of God, have mercy upon me, the sinner. It sort of plays right into that sort of misunderstanding.
And I was, when I first heard that, I said, oh God, no, please don't do this to me. The interesting thing was, listen to what you're saying, it's, once again, one of my biggest flaws is the tendencies. For a guy who is a part of a spiritual system or religious system that believes in not being literal, it's amazing what I tend to take literally, okay? And I have to admit that is probably one of the, having heard the prayer, heard the reasoning behind it, I have to say that's something I could easily do without any hesitation, because the whole conventional mother, father, sister, brother stuff, like I said, it's bowing and scraping. It's something, I've always had an issue with. It's because, and I've said it many times, and as arrogant as it sounds, I bow to nobody, okay? And it's that, I gotta admit, hearing the whole thing is probably one of the most intriguing things I've ever heard. And even further, I was thinking about my fiance, who's a chronic smoker. And I was thinking to myself in terms of how do you get someone to stop smoking? And I was, the correlation between wisdom, being attentive, using something along that lines to stop and look at yourself as to why you were madly, and no offense to the smokers here, why you were madly sitting outside puffing on that cigarette. Okay.
I want
to be mindful of the points that you made in your workshop, that this is not psychotherapy, but at the same time, smoking, for instance, let's keep picking on the smokers for a minute.
Yeah.
We know that once you haven't had a cigarette for several days, that your physical addiction is pretty much done. Mm-hmm. What's going on is a lot of these little guys still want to drag, and when you give them time, and as you start, I think you can also begin to disempower the eyes who are smokers. Mm-hmm. And your comments?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I really like the way you explained the idea, of cleaning house. I mean, I think it's the psalmist that says, "Be still and know that I am God." And and it's not simply a matter of know that I'm God, and you'll pipe down eventually. It's be still.
And this morning we're praying, "Create me a clean heart."
Yeah. I mean, there's also, and I also like the analogy as well, just coming from a practice perspective, and I could be wrong because it's a long time since I've read Magic and Theory and Practice, but there's an example, I think, given in the introduction where it talks about, the self or the mind as a lake and a valley surrounded by 5 glaciers, which we could look at as the senses kind of thing, and you have these things encroaching on the water, and they break off, and they break the stillness, and so what you have in terms of the sun in the sky is not being able to be reflected clearly in that surface, so it becomes distorted. So then you have the be still, and and everything follows afterwards. So I really like the way you explained it. I mean, I had looked at and practiced Hesychasm before, and I thought I had a pretty boiled down and communicable understanding of that, from my own teacher. But I have to say that's the best examination of it I've seen.
Talking about magic and theory and practice, and just because I did tell somebody the other day that I was a thelemic hesychast. Uncle Al, I think that even we talk about changing the background noise. The reason that a thelemite will say "will" before meals, and the reason that they will begin correspondence with "do unto thou will shall be the whole of the law," and end their correspondence with "love is the law, love under will," the reason that they'll do resh is to begin to train the mind to focus, to magnetize it towards the work on the true will. I think it's very much related. It's why monasticism happens. People think that, and having lived in a monastery for some months, people have this image of monasticism that all these guys all the time are just in these states of bliss. It was sort of what I had to the old monasteries in Russia, and it was a real authentic Garanta. I just feel, these guys, they probably leave footprints because they're levitating. And the fact is, most of what happens in the monastery is the first stage of prayer. Just showing up and doing the hours. But the fact is it's sort of on steroids because there's no TV, no radio, no conversation. And when you're not doing other things, you're walking around saying the Jesus prayer. What happens, though, is setting the background, clearing the house, making the preparation, then allows those moments of prayer, which are moments of grace. And they don't come all the time. But we're cleaning the house, we're making straight the paths of the Lord so that he can come. When he comes, it's his business and his time. It comes like lightning out of the east. But he's more likely to come if we prepare the way. And that's what we're doing, preparing the way for the Lord to come. Any questions, comments?
Well, it was also a brilliant presentation. Just to echo what everybody said about comparative traditions, reminded me a lot about spiritual alchemy, the salve and coagula, stepping back, observing, and then eliminating those false eyes. And the five senses in Kabbalah, five mean also fear. Like the devil card, where once you conquer that, you can lift that chain off. You're free.
Yes.
In Buddhism, they use the five skandhas. The five skandhas are the five, skandha means heap.
Right.
So it's also senses, but in actual, even though people believe that Buddhism talks about reincarnation, Buddha did not talk about reincarnation. You don't have anything that necessarily carries over within Buddhism strictly itself. It just doesn't address it. But what you do have is these five heaps that make up your personality. These your senses, and your mind, and your natural nous, if you will, as being these things. So different language, same intention, same. And it's kind of interesting. Your presentation has sort of reawakened for me some interest in that Western tradition because the parallel is so strong.
I've often also wondered with the story of the Samaritan woman and the five, just because we like to play with things, levels of initiation. You've had 5 husbands, and the one you're with is temporary, it's transitional, it's a portal, which means she's ready for initiation, she's ready for adeptship. And here's Christ at the well offering her.
Thank you to Thomas. If there are no other comments?
Before we go, I want to recommend, if you want to, this is by Eugrat Kovalevsky, who was a Russian living in France who founded the French Orthodox Church. It's a method of prayer for modern times. It's a great introduction both to the Jesus prayer and to the Lord's Prayer. And they actually maintain a community called Bethany where they focus on the Hesychasm practice. You probably all know the Way of the Pilgrim, which is excellent. The other, what I think, essential introduction to this work is Jacob Needleman's A Different Christianity. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, lunch is